Story 1. The Last Lake Trip. Labor Day weekend always felt like the end of something. Not just summer, but youth itself. Kara felt it as the car rolled down the cracked two-lane road, trees on both sides leaning in, their green leaves tinged with the faintest suggestion of orange. She sat in the back seat with her arm resting against the window, the humid air pushing in through the cracked glass, her hair sticking slightly to her skin. In the front, Jess drove with one hand on the wheel, sunglasses perched on her head, even though the sun was already sinking low. Next to her, Ryan fiddled with the AUX cord, queuing up songs they'd blasted all summer, half for nostalgia, half because none of them could bear to acknowledge that this was their last night before everything changed. Behind Kara, wedged in with the coolers and camping gear, was Miles. Always the joker, always the loud one. His sneakers were muddy from last week's hiking trip, and he kept kicking the back of Kara's seat just to annoy her. She shoved his leg, laughing despite herself, even though her chest carried the same uneasy weight she'd been feeling all day. When the lake finally appeared between the trees, shimmering under the gold of the evening sun, it felt like arriving at a sacred place. They had been coming here since high school. A tucked-away campsite at the edge of Stillwater Lake, a place that belonged to them, and only them. Tonight would be their last summer night together before scattering to their separate schools, separate lives. They pulled into the dirt clearing, the crunch of gravel beneath the tires oddly loud in the growing quiet. The forest was still, the air heavy with the smell of water, pine, and distant smoke from someone else's fire. They set up their tents quickly, their movements familiar, Jess hammering in stakes, Ryan struggling with tangled poles, Miles pretending to help, but mostly drinking from the first beer of the night. By the time the sun dipped fully below the trees, the fire was lit. Flames licked upward, casting light over their faces, painting their laughter in warm orange. Marshmallows blistered and caught fire on sticks, beers clinked together, and stories spilled out, the kind of stories you only told when you knew everyone was safe, when the night was warm, when it felt like you were untouchable. Kara tried to let herself sink into it, to laugh, to taste the sticky sweetness of burnt marshmallow, to capture every detail of this last night. But something inside her wouldn't let her relax. Her eyes kept drifting to the black water, where moonlight rippled across the surface. It was near midnight when she noticed it. Across the lake, maybe 50 yards away, a figure stood at the shore. At first, Kara thought it must be her eyes playing tricks on her. A shadow. A tree. Something reflected strangely in the moonlight. She blinked, leaned forward, and stared. No, it was a person. Tall, unmoving, facing their fire. Kara? You good? Jess asked, her voice pulling her back. Kara swallowed. I think someone's over there. The group turned, squinting into the dark across the lake. Miles laughed. It's probably just another camper. We don't own this place, you know. Ryan shrugged, already tossing another log on the fire. Yeah, or it's a tree. Relax. But Kara kept staring. The fire crackled, sparks drifting into the night sky, but across the water the figure didn't move. Didn't turn. Didn't walk away. It just stood there. For the next hour, the group carried on, laughing, drinking, talking about the future. But Kara's eyes returned again and again to the opposite shore. And every time, the figure was still there. Unmoving. Watching. When Jess finally announced she was calling it a night, the others followed. They doused the fire, packed away the trash, zipped themselves into tents. Kara lay in hers, Miles already snoring softly in the next one over, the sound of crickets and gentle waves lapping against the shore filling the silence. But she couldn't sleep. Not with the image burned into her mind. She turned over. Sat up. Finally, she unzipped the tent flap just a little, peeking out into the night. Her breath caught. The figure was gone. The opposite shore was empty. Just trees, black against the silver light of the moon. Kara let out a shaky laugh, half relief, half exhaustion. She zipped the tent shut, lay back down, and forced her eyes closed. Morning came hazy and bright. The lake glimmered under the pale sun, birds calling out from the trees. The smell of damp earth filled the air as they emerged from their tents, groggy and stiff, their voices still thick with sleep. Jess started the stove for coffee, Ryan searched for the last clean mug, and Miles complained loudly about his hangover. Then Kara saw them. Muddy footprints, starting at the edge of the water, leading up through their campsite, circling every tent. Her stomach turned to ice. "Guys," she whispered. Her voice trembled. "Look." They followed her gaze. The laughter died. There they were. Bare footprints. Human. Large. Too large. The mud smeared deep into the earth, the prints fresh. They circled each tent like someone had walked around, pausing at every door, lingering there, before retreating into the woods. No one spoke. The only sound was the soft hiss of the stove and the water beginning to boil. Jess's face went pale. Ryan muttered something about an animal, but his voice shook. Miles bent down to touch the prints, but pulled back as if the ground itself burned him. They packed quickly. Too quickly. Tents were stuffed haphazardly into bags, coolers shoved into the trunk, the fire pit left smoking. They drove away in silence, the trees whipping past them, the lake vanishing behind the bends of the road. No one looked back. But Kara, sitting by the window, couldn't shake the feeling that the figure was still there, watching from the tree line, waiting for the next group of summer kids to come and light a fire on its shore. And as the car disappeared down the highway, the woods grew still again. The footprints slowly filled with morning sun, as though nothing had ever disturbed the quiet of the lake. Nothing, except the memory of eyes across the water. Story 2. The carnival that wasn't there. The last weekend of August always had a heaviness to it. The air was still warm, the cicadas still screamed from the trees, but something lingered beneath it all, a shift, a warning, as if the world itself was preparing to turn a page. Dylan felt it in his chest as he drove, his girlfriend Emma beside him with her legs curled up on the passenger seat, scrolling half-heartedly through her phone. They had been on the road all day, exploring small towns off the highway, killing time before heading back to campus. College classes would start in a few days. Responsibilities. Schedules. The end of freedom. That's why this drive felt important, like one last grab at summer, before it all slipped away. The sun was sinking low, staining the horizon orange and pink, when Emma leaned forward and pointed. "Dylan, look." At first, he thought it was the sunset reflecting strangely off the horizon. But then he saw it clearly. Carnival lights. Bright bulbs spun in the twilight, a Ferris wheel turning slowly against the darkening sky. Neon strips outlined a swinging ship. Strings of lights draped over a row of booths and games. And faintly, carried on the evening breeze, came the smell of buttered popcorn, spun sugar, and fried dough. "No way," Dylan said, grinning despite the fatigue in his bones. "A carnival? Out here?" Emma laughed, surprised. "I didn't even think these things still popped up." "It looks perfect." They followed the glow down a narrow road until they reached a dirt lot filled with cars. Old cars. Fords and Chevrolets with peeling paint. Station wagons and pickups that looked like they'd rolled straight out of the 1970s. Families wandered between the rows, children clutching balloons, men and women strolling hand in hand, all heading toward the lights. Excited, Dylan parked their car near the edge of the field. He turned off the engine, but for a moment he didn't get out. Something felt odd. The families moving toward the carnival seemed a little stiff. Too slow, too deliberate. Their heads didn't turn. No one laughed, no one shouted. Just a quiet shuffle toward the glowing midway. Emma squeezed his arm. "Come on. Don't overthink it. It's cute." So they went. The ticket booth was an old wooden shack with peeling paint and faded posters stapled to the sides. Behind the glass sat a man in a black vest and bowler hat. His skin looked waxy under the buzzing light bulb overhead. When Dylan asked for 2 tickets, the man didn't say a word, just stared, nodded once, and slid 2 slips of red paper beneath the glass. His eyes never blinked. Emma giggled nervously and tugged Dylan away. Creepy much. Inside, the carnival looked like something from a dream. Rides creaked gently, outlined in bulbs that glowed faintly but gave off no real heat. Booths offered ring tosses and shooting galleries, with prizes that looked worn and dusty, stuffed animals with stitched-on smiles, dolls with glassy eyes. They walked between the stalls, hand in hand. But with every step, Dylan noticed the strangeness more and more. The smell of food was strong, popcorn, fried dough, roasted peanuts, but he couldn't see anyone actually cooking. No concession stands. No fryers, no grills, no vendors. Just the smell hanging heavy, as if it had been sprayed into the air. The families around them moved slowly, speaking in low whispers if they spoke at all. Children held balloons, but the balloons didn't sway in the breeze. People rode the Ferris wheel, but Dylan couldn't hear the creak of its metal or the whir of its motor. The swinging ship rocked silently, its riders moving back and forth like dolls. And the sound, there was no sound. No laughter, no barkers calling out for customers, no cheerful music. Just the faint scrape of feet against dirt and the low hum of bulbs that never seemed to flicker. "Is it just me?" Dylan murmured. "Or is this weird?" Emma nodded slightly, though she forced a smile. "Yeah, it's definitely retro. Maybe it's just supposed to be old-fashioned, like a throwback." But her hand gripped his tighter. They tried a game, ring toss. The man running the booth was tall and thin, his face partly hidden beneath a bowler hat. He didn't speak either, just gestured toward the rings. Dylan tossed one, missed, and was about to laugh it off when he noticed the man's hands resting on the counter. Long, pale fingers. Perfectly still. Too still. Not a twitch, not even a shift of weight. Dylan swallowed hard. They left quickly. They tried a ride next. The carousel. Painted horses bobbed up and down, frozen smiles on their faces. Emma climbed onto one, laughing nervously, while Dylan stood beside her. The ride started. Slowly. Silently. The horses moved up and down in perfect unison. The music box should have been playing, but the only sound was the soft squeak of the horse's pole as Emma shifted her weight. By the time the ride stopped, Dylan wanted out. "Let's go," he whispered. Emma nodded. She didn't argue. They turned back toward the entrance. Past the games. Past the Ferris wheel that still turned silently against the black sky. Past families who shuffled without sound, who never smiled, who never met their eyes. And then they saw it. The parking lot. Empty. Every car was gone. The rows where vehicles had been packed tight were now nothing but dirt and weeds. Their own car, their black sedan parked at the edge, was gone too. Emma gasped. "Dylan, where's the car?" "Where?" He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the exit. The carnival lights flickered faintly overhead, casting long, strange shadows across the ground. His heart hammered in his chest as they neared the wooden archway where they had entered. The man from the ticket booth stood there now. Not behind glass. Not seated. Just standing in the gate, his bowler hat shadowing his face. His grin was wide. Too wide. Lips stretched too far across his face. And his eyes glowed faintly in the dark, reflecting the carnival lights like an animal's. Emma froze. Dylan tugged her arm. "Run," he whispered. They bolted. Past the man, past the booth, past the edge of the midway. Their feet hit grass, then gravel, then the road beyond. They didn't look back. Dylan's chest burned, his lungs screamed, but he didn't stop until they were far down the road, the carnival lights shrinking into the distance. When they finally slowed, gasping for breath, the lights winked out. Just like that. Gone. The field was dark. Empty. They stumbled down the road for nearly an hour before another car passed. An older man pulled over, confused, asking if they were all right. He drove them back toward town, shaking his head as Dylan tried to explain. "There hasn't been a carnival here in years," the man said, his voice steady. "Not since the fire." Dylan blinked. "What fire?" The man's face was grim. 30 years ago. Whole thing went up in the middle of the night. They say it started at 3 a.m. with the Ferris wheel. Nobody got out. Not the workers, not the families. Burned them all up. People around here say you can still smell the popcorn on summer nights, when the wind is right. Emma shivered. They didn't sleep that night. The next morning, when the sun rose, Dylan insisted on driving past the field again, just to prove to himself that what they'd seen had been real. But when they pulled up, there was nothing. No Ferris wheel. No booths. No gate. Just an empty stretch of grass, dead and brittle, stamped flat in a perfect circle, as if hundreds of feet had trampled it. And hanging faint in the morning air, almost sweet, almost sickening, the smell of burnt sugar. Story 3. The Back-to-School Bonfire. The last night of summer always carried a strange electricity in the air. It wasn't just the crickets buzzing in the fields or the cool edge sneaking into the August wind. It was the knowledge that tomorrow everything would change. Childhood would tighten its grip for some, loosen for others, and the long stretch of freedom would collapse into bells, homework, and hallways. For the seniors of Ridgefield High, that night meant tradition. Every year, they gathered in the clearing behind the school, far enough into the woods that teachers couldn't see, but close enough that the looming silhouette of the building was always visible through the trees. They would drag broken pallets and old homework assignments, pile them high, and light a fire so bright it swallowed the stars. This year, Dylan, Kara, Marcus, and their friends were there, laughing and throwing math worksheets into the flames. The pages curled and blackened, sparks drifting upward into the warm night air. Someone had brought a speaker, playing music low enough not to carry. Another passed around sodas and cheap snacks. The night smelled like wood smoke and pine. It felt like a moment trapped in amber, one last celebration before life moved forward. But then Kara noticed him. At first, she thought it was just another senior. A tall figure standing at the edge of the clearing, just outside the ring of firelight. His clothes looked outdated, faded jeans, a button-up shirt tucked neatly into his waistband, the kind of outfit that might have belonged to someone's dad in an old yearbook photo. His face was partly hidden in shadow, but she could see the pale outline of his jaw, the dark hollows where his eyes should have been. "Hey," she whispered, nudging Dylan. "Who's that?" Dylan squinted through the smoke. "I don't know. Probably one of Marcus's friends. He invites half the town to these things." But when Kara asked Marcus later, he frowned. "Never seen him before. Thought he came with you guys." The group laughed it off, too distracted by the fire and the thrill of being together one last time. But as the hours stretched past midnight, the figure never moved. He didn't laugh. He didn't talk. He didn't shift his weight. He just stood there, hands at his sides, watching. The fire cracked and roared, casting shifting shadows. Each time the flames leaned a certain way, Kara thought she could see the man's face a little clearer. His expression was flat, empty. Finally, nerves got the better of Marcus. He grabbed a flashlight from his bag and flicked it on, pointing it directly at the stranger. The beam sliced through the smoke and hit the figure dead on. And then it went through him. The light didn't reflect. It didn't stop. It passed straight through his chest, illuminating the trees behind him. The group fell silent. Even the crackle of the fire seemed to die away. "What the hell?" Marcus whispered, lowering the flashlight. The figure didn't move, didn't flicker. He remained at the edge of the firelight, as still as before, as if he hadn't noticed what had just happened. Panic rippled through the group. Someone screamed. Someone else bolted for the path that led back toward the school. The circle broke apart, teens scattering into the trees, tripping over roots and backpacks. Kara grabbed Dylan's hand, pulling him after her as the fire guttered, sparks bursting upward before collapsing into ash. By the time they made it to the edge of the woods, the clearing behind them was pitch black. The fire was gone. The next morning, Ridgefield High buzzed with the chaos of the first day back, schedules handed out, lockers slamming, friends reuniting in the halls. But for the seniors who had been at the bonfire, an uneasy silence hung between them. Nobody wanted to talk about what they'd seen. Nobody wanted to admit they'd run from something they couldn't explain. Still, curiosity got the better of Kara. After the final bell rang, she convinced Dylan to walk with her back into the woods, to the clearing where the fire had burned. The air felt colder than it should have. Leaves crunched underfoot as they stepped into the empty space where the fire had been. The grass was charred, a black ring of ash marking the spot. But in the very center of the clearing stood something that hadn't been there the night before. A desk, old and rusted, its surface pitted with age. The kind of desk the school hadn't used in decades. Wooden top, iron legs, a single drawer swollen with water damage. Kara stepped closer, her breath catching in her throat. Carved deep into the surface, the wood splintered around the letters, was a name. Michael Hartley. She froze. She knew that name. Everyone did. Michael Hartley had been a Ridgefield student in the 1980s. He had died during a fire drill gone wrong, trapped in a classroom when the old wing of the school caught fire. They said he had pounded on the door, screaming to be let out, until the flames silenced him. Some whispered that his ghost lingered, unable to leave, watching each new class pass through the halls. Teachers avoided talking about it, but students told the story every year, usually around Halloween. Dylan swallowed hard. "Kara, we should go." But Kara couldn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the desk, on the name carved into its wood. The air grew colder. The trees seemed to lean in closer. And just at the edge of the clearing, half hidden in shadow, she thought she saw him again. The man in outdated clothes, standing perfectly still, watching.